Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to, once again, the City Council Chambers. Today's meeting is a Personnel Committee meeting consisting of 3 members of the Personnel Committee, Councilor Paulson, Councilor Freeland, and myself, Larry Cuffey. And we have 4 items on the agenda today. I will call this meeting to order. It's 10 a.m. Today's date is Wednesday. Today's date is Thursday, the 28th of May. And so we have 4 items on the agenda. I think I'd like to move down to number 2. Did we approve this already? Did we not?
We approved the job description, but I want to make sure everybody's okay with the RFP that's in the packet before I send it out and start advertising.
Okay, well, let's just go right down the list then with number 1, review the status of the furlough. And we all have some information in the packet that you were provided. And Britt, would you, I guess I'll just start that as we start talking about the furloughs and bringing people back to work on June 1st, I think one of the things we need to talk about is how we're going to facilitate that and what's the appropriate time and date in which to accomplish that. And our goal here is to make a recommendation as a committee to bring to the committee of the whole for the rest of the council for a vote and discussion moving forward based on our recommendations. I would like to see as a talking point, and when we start bringing these individuals back, and I'm going to turn this over to Britt and Sherry to discuss the number of staff to bring back and some of the challenges that we have based on some employee fears and those kind of things, and how if we call somebody back for a furlough and they don't want to come back, then there's a mechanism in place under the law in which to accomplish that goal and objective. But I think we talked about when we bring furlough people back, we want to bring back the recycling, of course, and we want to bring back maybe the library and talk about those as well. And what I'm looking at as a date for us to, at least a starting point for us to discuss and to consider, is bringing back recycling starting on June the 8th. Gives us the opportunity, which is a Monday, gives us an opportunity as a committee to recommend and give staff an opportunity to advertise to the public and say, hey, look, effective Monday, June 8th, we're going to start our recycling, and so we can get that up and running and get our crew ready to go. So that'll give us a little bit of time. In addition to that, as the furloughs come forward, one of the dates that's I would suggest we look at and look for the committee to make a determination. Any other council chair wants to make a comment about, if these furloughs are going to be, we're going to call back the furloughs, it might be due to start at the beginning of the upcoming pay period, and that next pay period would likely be on June the 15th. So just some dates to discuss moving forward. So Britt, is there anything that you can disseminate to the committee about what our plans are, or do you want me to continue?
You certainly continue, and as you were alluding to, we have been notified by St. Louis County that they have received 90% of their tax estimate for this year, so it's a much better scenario than everybody thought. And we normally receive that payment, and I'm going to look to Sherry for this June 15th or 16th, around that time frame.
Oh, you can hear me.
We'll relay her answer.
We didn't get her a microphone.
Go ahead.
Yes,
Around June 15th, yeah. So with that, I just would ask the committee to start thinking about a plan when we want to start bringing people back, when we want to release the furlough and bring these people back to work. I know we had I've heard from a lot of community members about recycling, that they'd really like recycling to come back. I would just ask that you give us time to advertise for that, so that I would suggest that we just don't start next Monday. Give me a week or so to advertise to people that it's coming back. This is the date it's coming. Go ahead and start putting back on the curb again. And then the other discussion point is the library. When do we want to start with the library coming back? We're getting a lot of people asking that same question. Can they come back? Can they come back? The staff is hesitant. They are very nervous about COVID. So I do think that maybe there is some prudence to having it curbside for a while at first, so that at least people are getting materials, and we're doing it in a safe manner, as Brian alluded to yesterday's meeting, that we would do a pickup, drop-off scenario, and then a quarantine of the books when they come in, and then get them back into rotation.
And so we have how many people on furlough? Is it 14?
14.
14 people on furlough, 10 of which are library staff. Okay, thank you. So a little synopsis moving forward. So I look for members of the committee for some discussion points and some recommendations and any questions you might have for our staff as we try to bring back our personnel for to accomplish the services that we provide. So, Counselor Freely?
Just kind of a quick review. So the furloughs were enacted in anticipation of potential revenue losses.
Correct,
Okay, and so the severity of that has been minimized.
correct,
And so it's timely for us to move forward with reopening
correct.
in some step fashion. And so I would agree with the mayor that we should set dates for that to happen, with dates that allow you that opportunity to advertise accordingly to prepare the community for those kinds of events to occur. Do we know the ending date for the completion of the library project? Because
do not.
I foresee, like, even if we do open and we have a curbside type of arrangement, it's going to be awkward at best to try and accomplish that, unless there's some other access point to that building, but I don't think so publicly. So that may come into play, I guess, when I'm looking at how we would be able to kind of seamlessly reopen the library, which is going to be difficult at best, even if you're doing a curbside. That's not seamlessly. It's not how you normally would be doing business there. But
Right, right.
and I don't know the extent of that project and how much it would be potentially interrupting that curbside service potential. So that's one thing I would take into consideration when we talk about the library, is like, how soon are we going to be able to accommodate the public to the library, even for something like a curbside service, to them to be able to check out books and so on. But yeah, at this point, I think we need to determine dates, whether it's the 8th, the 15th, whatever, to determine specifically and definitively when we're going to do these things.
And I think it's important for us to move forward, establishing, these are just dates that, that we're to get going as soon as possible, but this is a committee recommendation. It will have to go to the committee, the whole meeting, for approval moving forward. And so then there's a formal approval at the following council meeting. So there's a mechanism. This is an administrative decision. We don't need to do a vote about, when we open things up, but we can recommend, we can talk about it at committee home meeting, say, we all concur, or we'll all have the opportunity to discuss what we need to do in order to accomplish that goal and objective. And whether that's incrementally, as you discussed, Councilor Freely, with respect to how that library system opens, if curbside comes a little later on, and the library people come back later on, but the plan moving forward is to have some dates in place, to bring those individuals back. I know there are some communities that are keeping the library closed for a period of time. And so that's something we consider, but to give, for us at this committee level, to bring back to the committee whole, to give the authority as a body to allow our city administrator to bring back staff. Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to clarify, there are currently 14 employees furloughed. 10 of those are library staff. Where are the other 4? I would assume those are AFSCME employees.
Yeah. 1 is in fire and 3 in public works. Fire, the fire department.
Okay, I'm just writing it down.
Yeah, no
Sorry.
problem.
Okay, and then I mean, I agree. I'm in complete agreement with where everyone seems to want to go. One thought or suggestion that I had is I don't know why my microphone keeps doing that. I'm sorry.
We're good.
I just want to do that so Pam can hear me. But the alley behind there's that door, and I think that's an employee entrance. I'm wondering if they could do, even when there's rain or inclement weather, could we possibly put maybe an awning where they could drop, like, it would be almost like a drive-through? And even if a plexiglass would need to be established to hand out, I'm thinking of employee safety and employee protection. If they're uncomfortable, that might be a process to start. So the awning could come right off that door. People could drive down the alley in a one-way fashion. And I'm not sure I don't know if that alley is a one-way. But maybe it could be a temporary, this is the way we're going to do it to pick up and drop off books. Or the drop-off could just be, is the drop-off still there, or did they remove the book drop?
Right now, it's on the side of the building because of the construction, but it is there, and it's
Could
accessible.
it be
and open.
moved
Yes.
if needed, so that maybe that alley could be utilized that way? But that might be a suggestion to, so that the employees aren't going to be walking through a construction type of a situation into a parking lot with books, and maybe it might be raining or something like that. So that would be a suggestion I have. And then I agree with the pay period and, the 15th. The June 8th, starting recycling, will that be mid-pay period then?
Mayor?
You have a microphone.
All right,
Sherry?
thank you. Yes, Counselor. That would be mid payroll, but it is a Monday and it's workable.
So it's workable for you, okay. And then as far as the other 4 employees, 1 fire, 3 public works, what roles do those public works employees play, and what would you suggest or recommend bringing those individuals back? And I do know that Chief Lewis is short, so I don't know what that role in that fire position is, but could you maybe give us a little recommendation on that?
Yep, the fire is a single role, so we'd be bringing them back for EMS runs, which Chief Lewis, if he was here, he would attest that they have been starting to inch up a little bit now that things are opening again. So there's the services that they essentially had halted before are now back on, so people are starting to utilize it a bit more. In the Public Works Department, one is a recycling person, and then the other 2 are on repair crew that are off. And because there's 2 recyclers, one of them chose to not take the furlough, so he moved into the position, and one of the repair crew took the furlough instead, so. And repair crew does all those jobs we have around town that we really should be doing right now, and we are doing right now. We're doing the best we can with what we've got.
So would those employees be okay going back to the original positions?
yes.
And bringing back and integrating maybe at that next pay period in June? Would that be kind of the tentative date to bring those folks back?
Yes, and I would ask if we could talk to Scott Duranko, ask me here, because he has spoken to the employees, so maybe Scott could come up and give us a little.
Yes. Scott, would you turn on the mic? Scott?
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Yes, I have talked to one of the recyclers, and he's all excited to come back. He's on repair right now, so he's excited to do that. The other 2 repair guys there, one of them's actually a painter, so he'll come back and they'll start painting the crosswalks and everything else that's involved. So no, everybody's excited to get back to work. So that's one thing. Yep. So the sooner we can bring them back, the better.
Thank you, Scott. Anything else, Councilor Paulson? Okay, so I think one of your points was to, find a way in which to facilitate the drop box, whether it's in the alley with an awning or with some other method in which to accomplish that, but to direct our staff to work with, our temporary library director and our Public Works Department to determine what's the best way in which to accomplish the drop box, or where the best place for it to be, and when, and then determine when they're going to implement that, because we want to bring that back, but it's something you'll determine based upon that. Britt, is that correct?
Yes, I think honestly, if we're going to bring back the recycling, we bring back all Public Works at same
Right.
time, and then do the library as a separate building. And then fire, I think that day could just be, whatever the council determines, if we want to do the 8th or the 15th, whichever day works better. I know Chief Lewis could use the person, so the sooner the better would probably be.
And I think as a personnel committee, that particular employee in the fire department, there were other reasons for, for taking the furlough, right? And so is that situation been resolved?
We wouldn't know that,
We wouldn't know that, so.
but enough that this person, when they went out, knew that they might be called back before July 31st.
Very good. Okay, thank you. So, to recap, so the plan is potentially to recommend to the rest of the, Counselor Johnson?
I just wanted to tag on to Counselor Paulson. There is the garage door in the back that would be probably a little bit more conducive. It's set back off the alleyway a little bit, and we do have our own awning as a city, so just some other thoughts on that, making that more user-friendly, and then there would be a little bit more room. It's further down on the newer portion of the library.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think it's important for us to look at all the options that we have, whether there's some traffic issues or whatever. So whatever the best option is, moving forward, I think, we'll rely on our staff to determine that. So in summary of this particular issue with the status of the furloughs, are we understanding that potentially we'll have the opportunity to bring back recycling effective Monday, the 8th, give you opportunity for the city, for the staff to advertise, to advise people, yes, we're getting recycling beginning Monday, June 8th. And then the June 15th scenario about bringing back all the furloughed staff based on June 15th. It's a Monday. It's the beginning of a pay period. It's workable for that to be done. And so by bringing people back on a Monday, or recycling back Monday on the 8th, that's halfway through the pay period, which is workable. And then the 15th is the beginning of a full pay period for the rest of the furloughed staff. And so the 8th and the 15th would be a target date. And I do not think we need council approval for that, but we need all the, well, we don't need a vote, but the council shall be aware, and we should all come to an agreement as an elected body, if these are workable, and any other questions, and have every other councils have an opportunity to weigh in.
Yes, I think what you're trying to allude to is the council meeting's not till the 9th, so if we don't approve it before, if getting staff back the day before the council meeting might be just a little of a
Right.
hiccup. But I think if everybody's in agreement at the committee of the whole that this is the plan, I think we can move forward with that. If we all
Yeah.
agree that this is the plan, we're moving forward.
And so
we'll formally adopt it at the council meeting on the 9th.
So the committee whole will be June 2nd.
Correct.
And so that gives you 6 days to advertise, right, for the recycling?
Oh, yes, I
right? So
I
we
can
have
get an
plenty-
advertising plan started and get ready as soon as committee of the whole agrees.
Okay.
It'll start running on Wednesday, and we can start moving forward with recycling.
Okay, Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one other comment, and I know Brian was developing, as our interim library director, he was going to be developing some kind of a plan. Do you think it would be possible to have Brian maybe give us that plan? I'm concerned also about employees and their safety and how they feel.
Yes. Yes.
And, maybe just what their roles are and how they're going to stagger a schedule or just something like that, so we understand and that we're being mindful of employees and how they feel for safety.
Absolutely. We definitely can do that. Brian was working on it with staff before they went on furlough, and they just basically stopped right there. But he will get that ready. And he's been in contact with a few of the staff members already and warned them of the potential that we'll probably do curbside. So they've been given their input. And so I will have Brian get that ready for the committee of the whole. Yep.
Okay, and I guess I wasn't going to bring this up, but I think it would be prudent for us to do that because Councilor Paulson, you had indicated the fear with respect to some of the employees coming back. What's in the law or the governor's order, that if they're fearful and they don't want to come back, they don't have to come back, but there's a time limit there. And there's a pay adjustment over a 12-year period, which is a reduction in pay, right? It's 2/3 pay for 12 weeks.
If they choose to go on the.
If they choose.
The FMLA for COVID.
Right, if they choose to go on FMLA for COVID, so they wouldn't come back. So that's an option that's available under FMLA, so, okay. Anything else? I guess I'm looking for a recommendation to move forward with a formal motion for those dates, and then to be brought forth to the committee of the whole for the entire elected body to determine.
I would make that motion, but I'd ask Scott if you feel that that's timely, or was there an anticipation that they would be returning sooner than we're elected? Okay, good. All right, it's timely then. Thank you. I would make that motion to move forward then with those recommendations.
Okay, Councilor Freely, as a Personality Committee member, makes a motion to move forward with the dates of bringing recycling back on June 8th and the furloughed employees back on June the 15th with some method in which to accomplish the library Dropbox thing. So is there support for that? Is there support for that?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Further discussion. Scott, did you have something you'd like to bring up before we vote?
Would we be bringing back all the public employees Public Works employees on June 8th, or just recycling? I want to make sure we
All
got.
Public Works employees on June 8th, and then
Yes.
library
Brandon
staff would be the
15th. Okay,
15th.
thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification, Scott. That was the intent, so thank you. It's been moved and supported by the committee members. Is there any further discussion? Any council members present have any further discussion? Okay, thank you. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 You get that motion, Pam?
Yes, I did, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, let's move to item number 2 on the agenda, which is review of the event coordinator job description and the RFP. I think in our Thursday, May 14th meeting, we did talk about the RFP itself, and at the council meeting, we talked about the job description. We did approve the job description at that time. We moved to the city council meeting, and then Tuesday night city council, we did approve the job description. But once again, is there opportunity to review this, the MO, or the RFP for that? We send the RFP out, is that
Yep,
correct?
and the RFP is, hopefully, the intent is try to get everybody to give us the same information, so everybody's providing the same apples-to-apples scenarios so that we can look at them all equally. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was okay with it before I started.
Yeah, this is the request for proposal to move out for the advertisement for the event coordinator position, where we're looking at the RFP. I think what we discussed, I think we vetted out very, very carefully and thoroughly, that we believe this job description is reasonable and prudent, not that it can't change at some future time, but as far as for the purposes of setting up the RFP, this job description moving forward, and are we comfortable with moving forward with the request for proposals as requested by staff? Councilor Freely?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a very comprehensive RFP that's going to be proposed. And I guess that my question would be then, when they make their proposal, then that's when we find out what the potential cost will be for the services they will provide over the course of time and the extent of that contract. And do we have a budgeted mindset with regard to what's going to be appropriate and necessary to pull off the events that we're anticipating at the new facility?
And unfortunately, I don't have it with me, but I do have that
Okay.
information.
And you two have talked about that within reason? Okay. And my mindset has changed more. I've come to the realization, especially after yesterday, that we definitively do need this type of professional to assist us in, marketing this to the point where we're going to be able to provide revenue to the city for the kinds of events that we can hold there. So I think this is a good step forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Freely. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you. I also think it's very comprehensive and very well done. The only question I have is, where are we planning to do that advertising?
That's a great question. We'll advertise in our normal newspaper, of course, and then I was going to advertise in the League of Minnesota Cities because other cities use the same kind of services. And then I reached out to Beth Pierce to ask her to give me some advice on the industry. Where would I advertise in the industry? And so she's getting back some information to me on where she thinks I should put this.
Perfect, because I just think that's we need to reach that target
Yes.
audience or market. So
Yes.
I don't have any really resources or understanding of where to do with that either. So maybe, I bet Beth would though.
Yes,
So
Beth
I'm
is-
glad you reached out to her.
Beth is very excited for us to do this because she also feels that it's imprudent for us to fill this building. We're going to need somebody to do this. And
Thank you, Britt.
thank you.
Thank you. And maybe you could have some suggestions by the next committee of the whole meeting of some of the areas we're advertising as we move forward. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the RFP for the event coordinator job description moving forward.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Councilor Freely to move forward with the RFP as requested by staff. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Both items 1 and 2 will be referred to the committee of the whole meeting for additional discussion. Move to item 3, which is review the MOU for the Emergency Management Director. And so you have in your packet the MOU. I would like to start out as, I was approached by Chief Lewis. I did talk to him briefly about that, about many other things. And so I just, my perspective as a member of the Personnel Committee, that looking at the job description and looking at the emergency operations plan and looking at the duties and responsibilities that are attached to a position of the fire chief, and the historic models in which other fire departments work with respect to their ability to manage events, emergency directives, and those kinds of things, whether it's in the short term or the long term, that this falls usually within purview of their duties and responsibilities. And I believe, from my perspective, that even though it is a lot of work, it is within, the duties and responsibilities of the job description and the operations plan, and even though it doesn't specifically spell it out, it's the tacit improving in an emergency operations plan in the job description for his duties and responsibilities. So that's my perspective. So does any counselor have anything? Counselor Freedy.
And I agree. At first I was a little confused when I heard that the MAPE union was not willing to sign that, and kind of wanted to dig into why, especially given the fact that like another MAPE personnel had been provided that kind of kick and boost by being given the interim position at the library. But it's completely different in that that person's taking over an entirely different facility, for one thing, and was not a part of the job description. And then in reviewing the job description at number 30, and you're right, there's an extensive amount of responsibilities that are placed on the shoulders of the fire chief, but one of them in his job description does read as to develop emergency response plans and coordinate with public and private agencies. I mean, so that is encompassed within his job description, and so I don't feel that it's absolutely necessary for us to add an additional pay for that or a stipend because of this current situation that we're in. We certainly didn't anticipate the extent of the situation that we're in, and to some degree, maybe that's why it came to be discussed that maybe there should be some additional compensation. I understand that, but I don't know that I would agree that it's prudent at this time to do so. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Paulson, any questions or comments?
I guess I do have, and for clarification, I think when Councilor Johnson originally made the motion, it was to direct city staff to just look into it. And I wasn't under the assumption or that there would actually be an action step taken by MAPE. And I don't know if when you made that motion, that's where you, or what your thoughts were on that.
Councilor Johnson?
The purpose was to look at it because it was an option. And I think it is prudent that we had something to look at. It makes sense to me that the staff went forward and created the MOU, so then we had something to look at. They had something to discuss. I think my thought for looking at it was just that yes, he manages the emergencies, but this is a big one. This is something that, that he has spent extra time on that he normally wouldn't do in his normal day-to-day duties. If there was a smaller emergency, most emergencies, I think, as I read this, that's referring to a tornado, and in a month, the emergency part of the tornado is over, and now we're going back to rebuilding and that kind of stuff. My other thought, as I watch what's going on around the state, a different emergency declaration could be declared in the city of Virginia, and a different MAPE member may be the manager, the emergency manager. I don't know what that would look like if we had a police emergency. Would that be Maddie? Would that be Chad? So
It would be a riot or some kind of a event.
whatever
Right.
whatever it would be.
Right.
And again, most of those are short term, less than a week, less than a month kind of things. And this is going on month 3 or something. Lost track. So, and I also visited with Sherry a little bit about making sure that we were not giving bonuses or something like that. We can't do that as for city employees too. But the intent of this was never to create a divide or to have people go, well, I'm not getting anything extra, so they shouldn't get anything extra, or everybody should, if we had unlimited bank accounts, we could give everybody a $5 raise for the last 2 months, and that would be great. It doesn't happen that way, especially in government. So there was no ill will or intent on this other than to look at it, and I feel the staff did their diligence, and I think the union has spoken of what they want, and I think I'm willing to respect that moving forward. They have been all of the unions have been so cooperative, and the relationship between the government and the unions during this pandemic has been amazing. So I wouldn't want to do anything to wreck that relationship. So I'm willing to accept the unions, their answer, and move forward from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Johnson. Pam, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Clear.
Loud and clear, thank you. Do you have before you the motion that was made at the last meeting as to how we were asked, the staff, to proceed with this? Do you have the wording there?
And I will get it.
I reviewed it, and that it was not reflected, and I think that was when Pam couldn't hear when you made that motion, but the motion didn't reflect, and I don't know if I tried to go back on YouTube to find it, and I don't think that got recorded that day, but what the motion, I think the intent of the motion was to direct city staff to look into that.
Well, the reason I'm asking for that from her is that in the event that an amendment has to be made to the minutes,
And that might be the case.
we could do that.
Yeah, that
right?
might be the case.
Yeah, so let's look at that and see what that actually says.
And then going forward, if I may continue, Mayor.
Yes, please.
So where I was coming from on that, and what my thought process was, is actually within our own ordinance, in the 16th chapter, substatute, or subchapter 16.03, the establishment of emergency management organization, there is hereby created within the city government an emergency management organization, which shall be under the supervision and the control of the city emergency management coordinator, hereinafter called the coordinator. The coordinator shall be appointed by the mayor and city council for an indefinite term and may be removed by them at any time. Any salary or expenses will be determined by the city council. The coordinator shall have direct responsibility for the organization, administration, and operation of the city's emergency management organization, subject to the direction and control of the mayor and the city council. So where I was coming from on that, and it wouldn't have been necessarily from our city budget, but if we were to receive any federal or state dollars that could have potentially been allocated not from our city budget and not necessarily a stipend, and I don't know where the $5 an hour came. I mean, we didn't discuss that at all. So I guess my concern is that it went that far into MAPE with those specifics, which maybe, with city staff being directed to go and take a look at that was what came to be. But from where I was coming from as a counselor, just looking at the situation and reading our own ordinance, that there is a provision in there, and my thought process with that is if there would have been federal or state dollars to come forward, that those dollars then could have been or potentially have been, or to have city staff look into that. So that's where I was coming from when I supported the motion. I do, going back, I know we're discussing two separate issues with our interim library director, but I do feel that when we do review the EOP next time, that we kind of need to tighten that language up. And normally, like Councilor Johnson said, it might have been a tornado or a train derailment or a plane crash, that those things are going to have more of a term on the emergency portion of that, where this pandemic has gone a long time. And I do, in reading the job description, it does state that, but my interpretation of that is that he actually he's the one that reviews and creates the EOP. That to me is what the emergency the plan, like he's creating the plans, he's doing the preparation of emergency, but once that emergency declaration came into effect, there was above and beyond things. And that's where I was coming from, to have us take a look at that. And if the union voted that down, I will absolutely respect that. I just wanted to clarify where I was coming from and some of the rationale. Again, I didn't not want to make a divide with anyone within MAPE or with any other position, because I think everyone is, during this time, is going above and beyond. So that wasn't my intention, but I wanted us to look at that if there was any possibility. So I just wanted to clarify that going forward. And I don't want there to be any type of a divide, but I just feel like when one person is given a direction, and we had stated that if the library is to be closed, that person would not be receiving the extra dollar amount. And I know that we did state that. So now we're coming back. And so I would just like to see something uniform. And I think that I have a little bit of a hard time with non-uniformity. So that's where I'm coming from on both of those positions.
Yeah, thank you. And I think there was some significant discussion about the clear and concise differences between the interim library director and then additional funds for the emergency management coordinator, or which is designated. And as you know, as you read the ordinance, it's very clear. And then the EOP, that's included in the EOP. And then this is a position that's held for an indefinite period of time, or until such time as the city council says we no longer need that. So, Pam, did you have that motion?
Yes, I do, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, would you please repeat it for the committee and the other members present, please?
Yes. Moved by Councilor Johnson, supported by Councilor Paulson, to direct staff to appropriately compensate Public Works Director Brian Silver during the time the library is closed and when staff is on furlough, and to consider additional compensation to Fire Chief Lewis as the Emergency Management Director for his additional work during the COVID-19. Motion carried. And that was the Committee of the Whole meeting on May 19th.
Okay, thank you. So staff did their due diligence, provided this. We're here at the Personnel Committee meeting now and talking about reviewing the MOU. So we've had some significant stuff, and Chief Lewis is in, who would be the affected employee in this regard. And I did indicate to Chief early on, and I reiterate the fact that it is a huge responsibility and it's a huge commitment. And whether it's a 1 day or 1 week or 2 month, based on the EOP plan and the job description, it's indefinite. And compensation can be considered, with respect to that, in accordance with the city council. And we made a request to take a look at that as a committee of the whole body and direct staff in which to look at the appropriate compensation. The staff did their due diligence, came back with a memorandum of understanding, presented that to the bargaining unit in order to take a look at that. The bargaining unit took some action, actually, to indicate that they didn't approve this memorandum of understanding. And so as we move forward in concert with your concerns or your comments, Councilor Paulson, is the fact that maybe this is something looks at during the time in which we revisit, during the contract negotiations or wherever the case can be. So, but right now we're reviewing the MOU, and so what is our recommendation as the Personnel Committee? Do we move this to the Committee of the Whole meeting for a vote, or do we not recommend this go any further? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just clarify.
Please do.
My position on
Yep.
this. The thought process behind my support of Councilor Johnson's motion with regards to Chief Lewis was during the actual pandemic and his responsibilities as the emergency management coordinator. It would not, in where I was coming from, it would not have been actually the emergency, not what's in his job description. But because we have a declared emergency, a peacetime emergency, that triggered some different mechanisms. And within our ordinance, it states that there can be compensation for that. And that's what I wanted to look into, not maybe for the entire contract of our fire chief's employment, but during a specified time And I hope that clarifies why I wanted to look into that, and if in fact there would have been federal or state dollars to come forward, which didn't affect our budget, but you could put an allocated time from the time that we put in our emergency order into effect, which I want to say it was March 24th. From that time until we end, I guess that would be the period of time that I would look at reasonably. And what I just thought was going to happen is that it would just go to review and staff would come back to us. And I understand that the MOU was developed, but my understanding of what I was supporting in the motion was that it was going to come back and we would have further discussion and further clarification. So I just wanted to clarify that's where my thought process was in seconding Counselor Johnson's motion to look into what that compensation could look like, how we could define that. It's in the ordinance. Are there dollars able to come forward, and not necessarily as a MAPE situation, that MAPE actually took a vote on it, and it was not my intention to create any division within that union. So I just to clarify my position on that.
Okay, yes, thank you, Councilor Paulson. So this is, of course, a personnel committee meeting. We make recommendations to move this to the committee of the whole meeting for further discussion, or we don't. So based upon our discussions, and based upon the information that received from the bargaining unit, what is the committee's preference moving forward? So I'm looking for a vote, one whether either bring this up to the committee of the whole meeting, or recommend that it not be moved for further discussion. So, Councilor Friedli.
I guess we're not comparing apples to oranges, or we're apples to apples in this situation. I mean, and MAPE has essentially said that they're not supportive of this MOU. That's what they've told us already. I like the idea, though. I mean, my understanding, there's millions of dollars yet to be proffered to cities for COVID response. And I'm just wondering what kind of provisions there are in there for potential compensation for additional duties, as opposed to just expenses for equipment and or whatever. I think that should be researched, because I think there is additional compensation that would be justifiable given the extent of the responsibilities with this pandemic, as opposed to an isolated incident like we've talked about that may occur and then ceases. This is ongoing. But this, I don't think, is the way to necessarily move forward in kind of a comparison to what we did with an additional responsibility assigned to another MAPE employee. I don't think this is apples to apples, to be honest with you. So I guess I would be of the mind to not move forward the MOU, but to definitely do research into how we can utilize potential legislated dollars yet to be received by the city to compensate coordinators accordingly, if there's provisions allowing us to do so, to utilize that kind of money for those purposes. That makes sense.
And there is a bill in the at the national level in which to another bill that's being considered for that very purpose, to provide monies available primarily to help pay, compensate employees within cities and municipalities for additional work that had to be done in conjunction with this pandemic, which includes event management, the emergency management coordinator, police, those kind of things. So if the chief isn't available, you have an assistant emergency management coordinator, which is, Mr. Fredericks, does he get compensated for that? So looking at those things down the line, I think is prudent for us to do. But the vote here today is, this is an MOU that we're considering, and this is an MOU that was presented to the bargaining unit. Bargaining unit took action with respect to this MOU. So there are other ways, and as you has discussed, Councilor Paulson, and you has discussed, Councilor Friedli, about looking at other ways and necessary, whether it's a temporary adjustment, and that would include not just the fire chief, it includes all individuals within our organization who had extra duties and responsibilities, that had extra expenses, had to exercise extra due care as a result of being involved in this. So those dollars could come to us from the federal perspective, depending on what the bill goes, whether they pass that bill or not. But those dollars can, if allocated to us. And I think, part of that might be with the CARES Act money. There's over $600 million and still sitting in the governor's, coffers there, or the state's coffers, about how we move forward with that. So if those dollars come, we can take a look at, how we can use those dollars in order to accomplish those goals and objectives that we're talking about today. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm tracking with what Councillor Friedlieb is saying. I think that this MOU is not appropriate for the situation that we have before us regarding our emergency management coordinator. And I also like where you're going, Mayor, that, most department heads have gone above and beyond, or, whether it's MAPE union or, certain staff, or what that looks like. And I do know from after reading what the CARES Act covered for that Minnesota, I think Britt sent that link. And in reviewing on that link, and I'd have to go review it again, but it did state specifically for that, for response issues or any expenditures. And according to our ordinance, if we did have expenditures, I would think then that those dollars could be allocated toward whatever that looks like. But I would like maybe our city attorney to review the parameters of the CARES Act dollars at the Minnesota state level right now. And then maybe we could come back together and put together a plan. And I think this is it's a good template even going forward with reviewing our EOP for the future and for future updating what that might look like, so we can maybe tighten that language up so we're not in this situation again, and not comparing apples and oranges. I don't want to do that either, but I do feel that for a specified amount of time, if there are federal or state dollars available, I would like to see us have that discussion with whomever that has impacted within our city and city staff, working and doing extra with emergency management coordination. And I think I would like to see that come forward. But I'm in agreement that this MOU for right now doesn't fit with what my direction, what my intention was to begin with. So, and I would honor the MAPE vote on that.
So we're looking for a vote to not to proceed with the MOU, or it says to review, and we have reviewed it. And we've had some significant discussion about it, and we have some additional information from the bargaining with respect to this. So the action that we need to take here is we're reviewing it, but we can also take action here too. So,
Or you could take no action.
or we could take no action, that's right. So the question is, for me, if we took no action, there's still an MOU out there. If we took action to not move forward with the MOU, and and use other mechanisms in which to look at compensation to those based upon dollars that come in, as Councillor Paulson professionally alluded to. So those are our two options. Councillor Freely.
Given the fact that MAPE has stated that the potential exists for a grievance on this, that would make me believe that it would be in our best interest to not move this forward, but in the best interest of Chief Lewis, then to research what kinds of other monies may be available and the provisions within that to provide him compensation accordingly when those are availed to the city. Like I said, this is the previous two times that I'm aware of was assigning people to additional responsibilities outside of the parameters of their immediate responsibilities. And that was the Public Works Director taking on an additional facility such as the Park and Rec in Myers Memorial Building. And now the Park and Rec Director taking on an additional facility as an interim library director. Those are additional responsibilities for additional facilities that fall within, I think, the parameters of the intent of the MOUs that were developed for that purpose. there is some comparable significance with regard to the responsibilities that fall on the shoulders of the emergency management personnel, but again, it's not apples to apples in what we did previously, and the potential for a grievance to come forth with regard to this, I don't know that it's worth the time and effort of us to move forward with this MOU. I would disband the MOU and look at other alternatives with the anticipation that monies will become available to us legislatively, from which we will then be able to justifiably compensate Chief Lewis for the enormous amount of additional responsibilities that have fallen on his shoulders during this pandemic.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to be looking for a motion moving forward, but before we do that, Counselor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Do we get to know any of what occurred at the union? Like, that's nothing that we get to know, okay. Because, I'd be curious to know if they're willing to have that discussion about something other than an MOU or a different type of MOU moving forward. And then as I've been sitting here, we're talking about the MAPE union but the only money we've gotten in the bank so far is money that Chief Lewis has gotten grants for. Is there any other additional money that we have gotten COVID-related at this point?
Not at this point.
Okay.
It's pending.
So all that money's pending, and we know from the Highway 53 bridge that pending money can be 3, 4, 5 years out. So my question then is, should we get a nice allocation from the state, federal or state, could that money be used to give all employees because of that? It's just one of those things that at AEOA, they got a chunk of change, and we've all had a dollar raise during the emergency. So there's something I think I would like to think about, because it'll be nice to have extra money, and I know Sherry's we're not getting income from other places, but it's just a thought. I mean, I don't want to be exclusive of everybody, because in all honesty, anybody who's working a job is managing more than just their job. They're managing all kinds of stuff. So I know there's lots of rules, but that's just a thought. If that's what we're looking at, and that's what part of the challenge is everybody thinks they deserve a little bit more. Well, you're right, they all do. Everybody has been great during this. So that was just my question is, once we get the money, can we determine how it's spent then instead of pre-spending? Because that makes me really nervous that there's this money sitting somewhere, but it's still not, it's not in the bank. And I know that's what Sherry bases everything on, is the actual dollar amount is sitting in the bank. So I appreciate the conversation the committee's having, and I think that looking at something different, it might be right, but I also am curious to know, did the union deny it, or did they just not agree to it? I think there's the wording, the semantics of it, I think is important. If we ever got to know that, or if that's important, I don't know, but because there's a difference between not accepting and denying, and I think that might be something to consider too. Thank you for the opportunity, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Johnson. So the issue for us is, do we move forward with this or do we not? And I know that the CARES Act dollars, which are, it kind of spells it out, but we're going to follow the law, follow the rules, and there's going to be a lot of stipulations and restrictions and direction on how that money is being spent. So we would spend it based upon how we're able to spend it with respect to those kind of things. And this is obviously a unprecedented time in our community, and other communities are struggling to make ends meet. And by myself reaching out to other city mayors for the Minnesota Mayors Association and finding out how are they working their personnel as well. Well, they work through the emergency operations plan they have. They usually work through their county because those communities are so small. We are a population of over 5,000 and under 10,000, so we're in a unique position. So when this EOP was written, and then it was updated 4 or 5 times to where it is today, that it was written in such a form is because we do not have any emergency management coordinator, like St. Louis County has that emergency management center down in Duluth. They have a full-time EOC center, emergency operations center. We don't have that. So our emergency operation plan lays out a lot of things, how we work with the county, do we moving forward, all those kind of things. County-wide, try to work as a collaborative. The chief has done yeoman's work in doing that with other fire departments, EMS personnel, and through the county as well. So within our EOP, it's laid out pretty clearly. So, I mean, the responsibilities are clear. The chief knows what his responsibilities are. He's taken on those responsibilities with vigor and professionalism. And so when it comes to a compensation package with respect to that or other employees in community, it's prudent for us to take a look at what can we do with any federal dollars, CARE Act money, or any other money that we get from the legislature as well. And in the future, as Councilor Friedland and Councilor Paulson and Councilor Johnson all alluded to, is that there's zero way we can find, a way to compensate the loss of the employees' losses if we had to lay them off or they lost money as a result of the furloughs, or those kind of things. But so far, we've been able to keep them whole for the most part. Right?
The extra $600 a week, they're made very whole.
Right. So by the end of July 31st, there might be an issue, and that's why these dollars are important to try to allocate. So, any other comments from the committee? So then I'll be looking for a recommendation moving forward. Councilor Paulson.
At this time, I would like to make a motion to, again, we're going to a negative, so I don't know how to do this. I would make go ahead, Pam.
Can I?
Pam, your suggestion.
Are you voting a no, or are you just not going to take action?
I would actually like to see this sunset. I don't know if that's the correct word. So if I make a motion to approve it and then vote against it.
Action, I guess, to not take action on the MOU would be fine.
Maybe decline the MOU for the emergency management coordinator?
Yep.
Can that be, okay, so my motion then would be to decline the MOU.
For the emergency management director.
Correct.
Okay. Moved by Councilor Paulson. Is there support?
I'll support for discussion and
Support by Councilor Freely for discussion. Pam, did you get that motion so far?
Yes, to decline the approval of the MOU for the emergency management director.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Freely.
and I don't want to put you on the spot if you have nothing you choose to say, but more than welcome to. I mean, where the MAPE union stands with regard to this at this point, and I guess I'd like your views as far as whoops, excuse me.
Mayor, I could answer that question.
I can't hear what she said. I have no idea.
We can't hear you, Pam.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. The vote taken by MAPE, the interim library director passed, and the vote for the emergency management director failed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And we have Chief Lewis here to address the Personnel Committee. Chief, welcome.
Thank you. And just to start out, a bit of a history lesson. So I did not ask for this. I want to thank Councilor Johnson for recognizing the work that I have done on this. A clarification on the vote: it was a tie vote. It was 4-4, so it didn't pass for failure to obtain a majority. A history lesson, though. In 2017, I approached Britt and asked who the emergency manager was for the city of Virginia. We'd been without one for almost a year after Chief Benz left. Basically, she said to me, "Would you like to do it?" I said, "Sure." So that started a process where we engaged Bonnie Hondreiser to rewrite the entire city of Virginia's EOP. The emergency operations plan that the city of Virginia was operating under at that time was absolutely a click, copy, paste from something else. It was not useful. It could not have been enactive. It was cumbersome. It really didn't have an organization to it. I worked with Bonnie quite extensively, and Britt and Police Chief Mattson as well. She was fairly new at that time. And we designed the current emergency operations plan. This came at the prompting of one of the classes that I was in at the National Fire Academy, the Executive Analysis of Fire and Emergency Services Operations. And we did a whole review on that. So I've been integral to this whole process of developing the emergency operations plan with Bonnie. understand it backwards and forwards and the annexes and everything. I have spent of the city's time over $10,000 in time because I've accounted for all of the time that I have put into this. A lot of it was on weekends, a lot of it was evenings, a lot of it was working with other departments. That's stuff that the council doesn't see. What you do see, though, is the grants that we've gotten. We've gotten the $70,000 from the Minnesota Department of Health. There's $225,000 that should be deposited in probably this week. I just had a conversation about clarifying the identifier code on the last 3 numbers for an electronic funds transfer. So that's how you know. So it won't be 3 years out, Councilor Johnson, as the bridge money. It will be coming in the next week or so. I guess I would just put it in retrospective as find me another department head that has gotten as much money for the city as I have. Again, I didn't ask for this. I do appreciate the recognition. I'm willing to take whatever the council feels is appropriate for the work that I put into it. The emergency it's called EMC, Emergency Management Coordinator, is not in my job description. It is in the Emergency Operations Plan that was published in 2018, which was written and revised at my request to Britt and Bonnie offering to do it as part of a Quad Cities cooperative. So the reference to the fire chief being the emergency management coordinator, again, is part of a job that is not in my job description. It is an additional duty that I have taken on. In much the same way if you were to compare it to the building official job duties that they were paid an extra stipend for. So while you would say, well, that's kind of aligned with what they do, it wasn't an exact described duty before. They rolled it in, they went through a negotiation process, and there was extra compensation. I kind of view this in the same way. It's closely aligned, but it's not an exact duty. And the city has a past history of rolling in duties and responsibilities to people in positions, and pretty soon you have a person wearing 3 or 4 hats, and you wonder, which one do I do today? For a city the size of Virginia, it would be hard to justify a full-time emergency management coordinator. Even the city, or even the city of Duluth, does not have one. The fire chief kind of doubles as that, or the deputy chief before he became the fire chief. This is something the council doesn't know, but I am very, very close to becoming a certified emergency manager. I have the entire packet ready to go, and basically I just need a letter from Britt, which I haven't asked for yet, but that is something not even your St. Louis County emergency manager has. There is a certification level to get that, and there is a demonstrated skill, knowledge, and ability that you have to show that, much in the same way I have my executive fire officer, my certified fire officer, my certified emergency management officer, or the certified emergency manager goes along those same routes. It's a requisite knowledge, skills, and abilities, and the ability to execute. So I guess I would stand for any questions on that, but I did want to make that clear that this is not in my job description. It is an additional duty. I have performed that willingly. I have not asked for additional compensation, nor did I ever think about it until maybe, when collective bargaining comes up or something.
I guess I'm of the mind then, given what you've just told me, would it not be reasonable then upon the next contract negotiations to add compensation to your duties above and beyond where you're at currently, given the grants you've provided to us, the leadership you've provided to us? That might be the timely.
That's exactly what I've said to my union president as well, that the timing is much more suited for a bargaining unit. And again,
As
it
opposed to
came up.
an MOU. I mean, I don't think the MOU right now is the appropriate manner by which to compensate you justifiably and accordingly. I think it would be in our best interest to wait till that time to negotiate accordingly.
Correct, and there's a lot of ongoing things that you don't see. The city of Virginia may not know, or the council may not know, we have a siren that is down and we have another one that is malfunctioning. The people have been contacted that do the siren repair. They can't get out due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have a north side siren that does not work in the city of Virginia. I've been working feverishly to try to get that scheduled, but they're not sending out technicians. We have other sirens in outlying communities such as Buell and Eveleth that did not even go off. So there's other communities, again, you allocate $5,000 a year for emergency management, which is far too little. The maintenance for this system that we currently have, and again, there's other communities that are being protected by the siren alert system. We're the ones that have the weather radio. that monitor the multiple different alerts. Our battalion chiefs are the ones that would be responsible for sending out that alert if that comes and notifying the siren. So there's a preparedness level to this that has to go on all the time, not just when the pandemic strikes and we run around and go, oh, let's get PPE. We've got plenty of PPE right now. We've got lots of it. What will happen with this next $225,000 that comes in, though, is we will have to spend it in a manner that shows that we needed it according to an emergency management. Now, that could be a brand-new ambulance. You can justify that with it, because I wrote that specifically in the grant, is to cover it. But to go out and buy more N95 masks at this point, when we have as many as we do, or as many gloves as we do, it just doesn't seem reasonable and prudent. So we want to be the best stewards of the resources that we have, aligned with how we applied for that funding.
And can I ask Sherry, so like when negotiations come up for MAPE supervisory contracts, are they individually negotiated then, or is it a union contract?
It's a union contract, so we
so the
negotiate with union reps.
So the potential for him being provided additional compensation for these additional responsibilities within your union is reasonable for us to consider for his contract as opposed to all of supervisors.
You're going to have to consider his particular wage along with the rest of the MAPE contract in the union negotiations.
So he can't be separated out for
No.
additional compensation.
But it can be a discussion at negotiations.
Okay. And MAPE would be open to that discussion, I would assume?
I assume they would.
Okay,
That's
because
part
they're
of the
not
contract.
open, they're not open at this point, or at least in a 4-4 split, to not move forward with this MOU. So I think there is another mechanism by which we can move forward with providing him compensation that he's duly, justifiably, should be provided, but I don't think this MOU is the appropriate manner to do so at this point, just given the fact that it's been a split within the union and there's a potential for grievance. I just don't think that does well for he as a member of the union, or the union itself, or the city's relationship with the union. So I second that motion that this may not be timely for us to move forward with this MOU, but we should continue to research a mechanism by which additional responsibilities that fall upon supervisory personnel can be compensated accordingly and justifiably at some point.
Okay, thank you. Chief, thank you very much. So I think we all recognize, the scenario that you laid out, Chief. And I believe that in our emergency operations plan, which you were part of writing, which before you came on board was one of the top priorities for the city, at least from the mayor's perspective, on this was woefully inadequate. And I worked under many emergency management coordinator, which I was an assistant on for the crime part of it with the police department as opposed to the fire side of it. This is the fire EMS side of it, which I believe that compensation is prudent, compensation is reasonable, and compensation should be given. But from an MOU perspective, I don't think that's the case. You have, you're part of a bargaining unit, and that bargaining unit determines, a memorandum of understanding to put as an addendum to a contract. For me, I'm going to vote in favor of the memorandum not to move the MOU forward or whatever it is. But, and then in the second motion, I'm assuming that we would direct staff in which to find a way in which, you serve as the fire chief and the EMS coordinator in your regular duties and responsibilities. And I do agree that this isn't just a compensation that's done during a national emergency or a pandemic when all of a sudden this triggers additional duties and responsibilities as a result of that. Because from my perspective, an emergency management coordinator is duties and responsibilities that are performed all year round, not just during an emergency situation where plans are being made, upgrades are being made, relationships are being established, certifications are being carried, and compensation needs to be made for those certifications in that regard. So I would hope that we would look at, I'm not just looking at the compensation with respect to a union contract, but, you have your union contract as part of MAPE. You negotiate it based upon what you've always done, but as part of the emergency management component of that, there could be a separate stipend for that based upon that, and that's been established before. It's been established in the fire department. We have fire captains, and you had the drivers, you have all those kinds of things, and those are all changed around a little bit, but this is a position where, because we're unique, we're under 10,000, but over 5,000. And these smaller communities rely on the county to do their EOP stuff. We don't. We do our own. So we have to have some way in which to compensate, I agree. But I don't think the MOU is the proper process moving forward. And so I would urge us to look at other ways in which to accomplish that goal and objective. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I know there's a motion and a second, and we're continuing discussion.
Yep.
I do have a question then. When is the MAPE contract negotiation, or when is that contract up?
It expires this year, December 31st, so negotiations usually would start in November.
Okay, so I guess here's what, and I don't know if we should vote first and then go on to the next step, but my thought process on this is, after hearing some of the history from Chief Lewis, after listening to what you, Mayor, are saying, you're seeing, and I think Councilor Friedlieb, you're seeing this as additional above and beyond duties, but until that MAPE contract negotiation is opened up, we still have the above and beyond duties for what I had originally asked for compensation or looking into compensation for. So if that's not going to be until November, and Chief, our emergency management coordinator has done extra within this time span of this pandemic, and there could potentially be CARES Act funding for that, I would like to see us do twofold things then, to look, one, into that, and two, into the contract portion once the MAPE contract opens back up in November. So I'm in agreement with that this MOU does not make sense right now, but I would like to see those two separate discussions being discussed.
Yeah, and thank you. And what, I'm not saying it complicates things, but, it is a contract that we have to follow. It's a negotiated contract. For example, if it's an exempt employee, we wouldn't have a problem with that. We could make those compensations, because it's an individually exempt employee. But in this particular case, Chief Lewis is a member of a bargaining unit. In the bargaining unit, we have to honor the contracts as negotiated. And I'm in full support of trying to find a way in which to compensate staff for not only their time, their training, their experience, their certifications. I think it's important for us to do that. If we're going to keep good employees working here, whether it's in public works, whether it's in fire EMS or police, we have to make sure that they're provided a commensurate salary and benefit package that is molded into the duties and responsibilities that they're asked to perform in this community. So, Councillor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I understand what you're saying. And I guess then if that is the case, then I would like our city attorney to look into what that ordinance states and what that spells out, because according to my interpretation, that ordinance gives the city council the ability to compensate during a time such as this. So I would like clarification on that, and maybe that will help me direct, are we looking at two separate issues, or are we only looking at one issue in terms of additional compensation for additional duties? So if that ordinance, that specific 16.03 could be reviewed by our attorney to help me understand what the definition of that is, then I fully understand and appreciate what you're saying, but the contract doesn't open up until November for negotiations, and the extra work is being currently done. So I need clarification on that, because I feel like if there's money in the CARES Act, and that's what those dollars should be allocated for, and we're getting 90% of our dollars back from St. Louis County, it doesn't put us in as much of a budget issue regarding the allocation of potentially up to $600,000 from the CARES Act for our city. So I think that's where I'm coming from.
And I think we could certainly do that under the ordinance if there was an exempt employee. Once again, terms and conditions of employment changes to terms and conditions of employment or duties and responsibilities or compensation has to be negotiated. That's under the PERLA, the Public Employees and Labor Relations Act. We have to negotiate with the bargaining unit of that individual for additional compensation. That's required by law. Simply, if it wasn't a member of bargaining, it was exempt, we wouldn't have this issue. We could take that ordinance and say, okay, this is the duties and responsibilities. So we're kind of in a quandary right now. And, I'm in full concert with you that compensation is necessary, to a particular in this particular instance. And in other instances, we've done that as well. So, any other discussion with respect to this? So Pam, after we have some really good discussion about this particular MOU and the necessary means of which to move forward with additional investigation. So let's, would you read back the motion? We'll vote on that motion, and I think there's going to be another motion with respect to asking for some clarification from our attorney moving forward. So what is the current motion on the floor?
Moved by Counselor Paulson, supported by Counselor Friedlieb, to decline the approval of the MOU for the Emergency Management Director. And I think there was discussion about not recommending to proceed with it, but I don't know if you want that in the motion as well.
The motion
hear
as,
that?
the motion as you reiterated is the motion that stands.
Okay.
Okay, moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Counselor Paulson?
I don't know exactly how to make this motion.
Let's
but
figure it out.
Were you, for the city attorney, you want to direct staff to have the city attorney work on,
I'd like to look
Review?
at that, actually 16.03,
okay.
how that applies to the EOP. And
Everybody voted on that motion, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
The three.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay,
Yep.
and now you're starting a new motion.
trying to.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
crafting it now, Pam.
Okay,
So I guess we need to make two different things because the contract negotiations are different than from what I was originally coming forward underneath Counselor Johnson's motion with my thought process with this additional responsibility. So I think the motion would be to have our city attorney look into section 16.03 of the ordinance and I guess look also at the EOP and come back to us with a potential recommendation of compensation. And I would tie that into federal dollars or state dollars from the CARES Act funds that the city would be allocated. What I was looking at originally was not out of our city budget. It would be for the CARES Act for our COVID response and how our emergency manager had to do above and beyond for that response. So that would be a
Okay,
very,
now,
can you
so-
craft it better? Go ahead.
No, so just to clarify, you're looking at, I think we are looking at some way to compensate Chief Lewis for the additional duties and responsibilities as the emergency management coordinator, which is identified in our plan. And in order to do that, for the duties and responsibilities that he's already performed, can he be compensated under the CARES Act or other funding sources coming in? And we're asking for a city attorney to look at that. Is that kind of where you're at for the first part of that?
Not,
No?
no.
Okay,
Because
please.
I'm
Okay.
almost specifying during this pandemic, during the
Okay.
COVID time,
Okay,
and what our emergency management coordinator has effectively done above and beyond. And then after that, look at what the allocation in 2017 of him being our emergency management coordinator, which in my opinion, that would be like your day-to-day things, or if we had a tornado or a plane crash or something that could be, I mean, this pandemic has been managed, it's been 3 months now. So that's where I'm coming from on this. I'm not stating that I want to equate it to his job description. I don't think that it needs to be equated to the job description. I think this has to do with the ordinance and section 16.03 and what it doesn't state anything in our EOP, the actual plan about compensation. The
No.
only place it states that is within the ordinance. And I would like to look at that and then have, if there are dollars coming from our CARES grant to our city, I would like to see about allocating a portion of those for compensation.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense. Pam, do you kind of have an idea how to craft that motion, or should we try to narrow that down a little bit more?
I think we got it. So you want the city attorney to review the 16.3 of the city ordinance for potential compensation through the emergency. Oh,
Pam,
yes.
could you repeat that one more time? You broke up, just to make sure that that's what the motion is on the floor.
To allow the city attorney to review section 16.3 of the city ordinance for potential recommendation of compensation to the emergency management coordinator and to use CARES or federal or state funding that would be received during the COVID-19 emergency.
That is correct. Thank you very much.
Yes, that is the correct motion on the floor by Councillor Paulson. Is there support for that?
I'll support that.
Support by Councillor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Is there any further discussion? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Did you get that vote, Pam?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else related to this? Anybody like to make any further comments with respect to that moving forward? Okay, thank you. I guess we'll move on to the next topic then, which is the last topic on our discussion item. It's on our agenda item is to review the application for the Human Rights Commission, and it's encouraging that we have one, which is good. So thank you. And I'll open this up to anybody who's on the committee or not on the committee moving forward, so.
I have excuse me, Mayor.
I'm seeing, Sir Councilor Freely.
Okay, thank you. I did review the application, and it appears to me that the background that Ms. Dedeen has would be reasonable for her to be appointed to that commission. And there's only one opening. Is she the only applicant? Regardless, she does have a background that I think would be beneficial, and she could add favorably to the discussions at that commission level.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Freely. And I must say that I know who, Carolyn, Ms. Deneen, and from not only from a social perspective, but from sitting on committees and commissions and knowing her history and her background and her employment history for a long period of time, which really molds well into that position. So.
And so I would make a motion to move this review of the application to the council or committee of the whole meeting and move forward with that.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Councilor Freely to move the applicant, Carolyn Deneen, as to the committee of the whole meeting for further consideration for appointment to the Human Rights Commission. Is there support?
I'll support.
Yeah, support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. You get that motion, Pam?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Did. Motion carries. And before we join, I'd just like to say one thing. I mean, just my personal perspective on things is that, we have to follow contracts, we have to follow rules and regulations, we have to do all those things. But the bottom line is that there comes a time, where it's unanticipated, and you look at the duties and responsibilities that a group of employees or an individual employee is performing. And those duties and responsibilities sometimes fall outside the purview and the parameters of the normal course of the duties and responsibilities that comes to play. And, other duties as assigned is an important part of an individual job description, because comes a time where other duties as assigned is necessary to accomplish simple tasks or little tasks are a little bit over and beyond what the normal duties and responsibilities of daily routine is. But I think from my perspective only, in this particular instance, the emergency management coordinator plays a larger role, a more important role, not only a short-term but a long-term role in managing the department. So if there's a way that we can find a way for this to continue to operate within the MAPE organization, but at the same time provide some compensation on a regular basis through negotiation or whatever it is for our fire chief, when this particular instance has been designated under the OP plan as the emergency events coordinator, we have to seriously consider providing that function. And I fully agree and hope that the monies that are going to be allocated as made a motion by Councillor Paulson is going to have that opportunity to be able to provide some compensation, not only for Chief Lewis, but for others too. But this particular job that's been done, it's a huge responsibility and a huge undertaking. So I think there's a lot more than $10,000 worth of time that you spent in that, Chief. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is about the Human Rights Commission and this appointment. I remember several months back, we had another, I thought we had a couple more applications, and I don't recall if we acted on those. I know the Human Rights Commission has come down to just a couple folks. Several people have had to leave for personal reasons. So I would ask if Pam could look and see if those applications are still floating around, if we need to reach out to those individuals and see if they're still willing to serve. As we're moving forward and opening back up, I think the Human Rights Commission is an important group of folks, and we need to make sure that our Human Rights Commission has a diverse set of folks on it as well as we're moving forward. So if Pam, if you could just look into that, and I don't remember how.
No, I just looked, that actually got this one in April. So it's been a while. And that's the only one I've received. Unless there was one last year, but we would have already reviewed those.
Could you maybe pull up the last 6 months or so of applications? I just feel like there was an application that we got that I don't remember acting on. And I'm getting some nods up here. So if we keep those or not, or how that works, I'd just like to know, because I'd really like to see that commission get going again. It's going to be important, and especially with current state in southern Minnesota, I think we need to be proactive as we move forward. Thanks, Pam.
Yeah, and I think we're moving this particular application because it did come before us here, and we're, as a personnel committee, moving that to the committee of the whole meeting for additional discussion. And if there are other applicants, we can do the discussion there and then set up an interview process for those positions if there's more than one. I think we have more than one opening, do we not? So hopefully we'll be able to fill those. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, did we vote on that? Okay, thank you. All right, there isn't another listing on number 5 for other items of concern, so technically we can't talk about anything else. So I thank everybody for coming. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, Councillor Paulson and Councillor Friedlieb, and of course, Councillor Johnson, for coming to this Personnel Committee meeting. We will stand adjourned until our meeting tomorrow at, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you, everybody. We stand adjourned.